But let me start with the Singapore election, taking up the social media challenge. And essentially, if you think back to the 2011 general election, where the ruling party in Singapore lost several seats and a big group constituency seat as well, that caused shockwaves all around the country. And many people in social media and elsewhere began to draw straight line projections into the future, where this was going to be the way it was going to be in the future, with more and more seats being lost to the opposition, the social media getting more and more of a dominance in terms of political communication, and ultimately the demise of the mainstream media. And 2015, as a result, was widely seen as the election which will be the social media election. Of course, having taken over as editor of the Straits Times in 2012, it was not going to happen if I could possibly help it. So when I started on trying to figure out how to respond to this new media landscape, the first thing we thought we had to do in the Straits Times was to undergo a sort of comprehensive and fundamental change in the way we reported the news. And I'm not going to go into great detail, but Ravi will bear me out to say that we undertook a major transformation of the newsroom in the Straits Times to transform it from a pure print operation to a completely multimedia operation, which was able to do everything that we saw being done in the social media space. So if people were interested in blogging, we would blog. If people were interested in Facebook, we would be on Facebook. If it was Snapchat or Instagram or any one of these proliferation of platforms, we would be in that space. You see here a picture of one of my colleagues in the newsroom doing a video, television-style forum, which we began to do several years ago and have grown better and better at doing over time. And essentially, it was to be able to operate in that space, online, with videos, with mobile, to ramp up our political coverage so that we would be available to readers anywhere, anytime, any way they wanted it. And the challenge for us was to make sure we maintained our dominance in readers' minds and to be that go-to place for political information. And of course, we had a lot of competition emerging from the likes of Mothership and TOC and Yahoo News. And my challenge to the political desk in the Straits Times and the rest of the newsroom generally was that come GE 2015, we should continue to be the main source of information for the audience in Singapore. And I'm happy to say that during the campaign, September 1st to 11th, we saw our website traffic nearly double. And we saw the traffic on the day of the election and the day afterwards triple. So that was a good outcome for us because it said to me that people were still coming to us and relying on us for information rather than the audience being split up across many, many sites. But don't take it from me because I'm obviously a biased party. This is from a presentation that was done earlier in this afternoon, a study by the Institute of Policy Studies in Singapore, Dr. Carol Soon, no friend of the Straits Times, often critical of us, but this is their conclusion, and I'll just read you. Against prevailing assumptions, GE 2015 was not a social media election, and an online survey of 2,000 people concluded that the mainstream media and their online counterparts were used most frequently and trusted more as sources of information. I couldn't have asked for a better outcome, a better quote. Straits Times didn't sponsor the survey, I hasten to add. So I was very happy with this outcome because it said to me that what we were trying to do, we did to some extent manage to achieve. Now, the second point I'd like to make, which we can get into discussion as well, is the way in which social media not only influences and competes with mainstream media, but serves as an echo chamber where views start to get reinforced and hardened and strengthened in the process of being repeated. And this was something we saw in 2015 as well, because people in social media were drawing straight lines into the future. everybody, and I mean everybody, began to believe that it was inevitable that there would be a further loss of seats for the ruling party, and perhaps going further than anybody had anticipated. And this was the view. If you had spoken to people in the PAP camp, if you had spoken to people in the Workers' Party camp, many people took this as a given. And during the campaign, I remember speaking to several individuals, people I met at rallies, friends of mine, people, complete strangers, and they were saying to me, there is a certain disconnect between what I'm hearing in private conversations and what I'm seeing online. Because online, there's a certainty that we're going to see a lot of seats changing hands, and more GRCs or group constituencies will change hands at the election. But in private conversations, people were saying, well, it is the Jubilee year of independence. Mr. Lee Kuan Yew has just died. The Prime Minister is popular. Surely that would translate into votes for the ruling party. But online, there was that echo chamber going on and reinforcing views. And I think that's a phenomenon which is not unique to Singapore. If you look at what was going on in the American elections, you look at what was going on in Brexit, a certain view took hold of as the prevailing conventional wisdom, and it became very, very hard to challenge without any independent basis to do so. And that, to me, is a second important conclusion I draw from the challenge from social media. And it's to do with the importance of news organizations having the resources and the commitment to invest in their own ground operations so that you get a very good understanding of what's going on in the real world. If you see the picture there, that's a celebratory mood in the Workers' Party rally. All of them kind of assuming that victory was on the cards, but when the results came true, didn't quite turn out that way. And unless news organizations have that ability to do good sensing of what's going on the ground, there is a very real danger that we allow social media to sort of shape the way we shape our coverage, and that can give rise to surprising outcomes. The third point I'd make is a simple one, again related to the importance of credibility. Obviously, as I mentioned, the importance of having your own ground operations so you can have a credible view of what's going on in the real world. Obviously, the importance of media trying to be fair, impartial, independent in terms of shaping our coverage. And I can tell you in 2015, we took great pains, right down to the choice of pictures, the choice of headlines, to maintain a line of being seen to be credible, because we felt it was so important in the face of so much competition out there that we be seen to be fair, because otherwise there was no way we would hold on to our audience. And I think the outcome is in the survey bore that out. If you don't believe me, go online and Google coverage of 2015 general election, and you'll see a lot of commentary on it, for the most part, making the point I've just made. Now, the importance of being credible is not only something you do during election time. I'm of the view that it's something you've got to do throughout the process, constantly. And that relates to the importance of journalists going out and engaging newsmakers as well as their readers day to day and constantly, and making the effort to show your readers and your audience that really you are one of them, you are on their side, and minded to report the news accordingly. That's why in the ST Newsroom, we have launched a whole series of reader engagement activities, including what we now call the Ask ST platform, where we go out and talk to our readers about issues and topics that are of interest to them. And I think the failure to do that in media spaces elsewhere is precisely what has enabled a gap to open up between media commentators, media practitioners, newsmakers, and their audience, allowing the likes of your Breitbarts and your alt-right to emerge and paint them as fake news and alternative media as the so-called real news. I think therein lies the great danger that mainstream media face. If we don't make the effort to show our readers that really we are with you and we are one of you, then you allow that space to be opened up. And to me, the whole challenge of maintaining the credibility of the media is not only for journalists to do, although a large part of it falls on us. There's also a responsibility in society from newsmakers, from business leaders, from community leaders. I can tell you every politician out there is a believer in the freedom of speech until it impinges on his own ministry. And it's important because when you get a president of the United States who is routinely pouring scorn on the mainstream media and calling it fake news, it undermines the credibility of the media. It undermines the credibility of the institutions. And I'd like to contrast that with the approach taken here, which I found quite helpful, where the law minister has gone out of his way to take on and expose some alternative sites which were actively promoting fake news and stirring up xenophobic sentiments for profit. And in doing so, I think he has done all of us a service, but helped the mainstream media because it has, in a way, reinforced in people's minds the critical importance of having a reliable source of information. And I think that has helped because the recognition that there are sites which are actively trying to diminish and destroy and undermine the credibility of mainstream media for their own profit. And mind you, it is a commercial imperative that's driving it. The more they can diminish the Straits Times or other mainstream sites, the more they can draw profit from it. So by having newsmakers, business leaders, deciding that they're not going to stand for it, it does reinforce the ability of mainstream media to hold our ground. So I'd like to just conclude with three big thoughts that I'd like you to think about, and maybe we can discuss it further in the Q&A. Firstly, I believe very strongly that for democracies to survive and to work, it's absolutely critical that you have a good source of reliable media. Media that's minded to be fair, impartial, objective, and strives to do so. Obviously, we'll make mistakes, we'll never always get it right, but when we do, we recognize it, we correct it, and we move on. For the media to be able to do that, it needs resources because fact-checking, ground operations, going into a subject in depth is a costly exercise, and professional journalists have families and kids to send to school, and they are just as keen as anybody else on bonuses and promotions and all of that. So it is a costly exercise. And that leads me to the third big question in my mind: how is it we are going to get in our societies media structures and media organizations which are sound and sustainable for the long haul? Because unless we get that right, the second doesn't follow, and then the first doesn't follow. So without the financial resources to be able to deliver good media, we're not going to get good democracies as well.